Good morning. How's everyone this morning? Good. Thanks, Charlie. Okay, I want to welcome you and also thank you all for being here this morning. This is an important element of our shop. You all do an important thing for us as far as volunteering and leading this group, and I really want to thank each and every one of you for what you do. This meeting is scheduled today to talk to you about what it means to be a mentor, manager, an instructor, but more importantly, the responsibility of being a P-card holder. And that's what we're going to be talking about, and that's really kind of the overarching discussion this morning, because they all kind of blend together. So as I said, thank you for volunteering. The shop wouldn't run without the work that you all do for this club. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours. As we've talked before, it takes probably 30,000 hours every year of volunteer time to keep the shop operating. Our training programs are exemplary. We're actually now at 24 students a month. This is the first month we've done it, and it's working pretty well so far that we can see. We have had a number of people that haven't shown up, but overall, I mean, that's going to help us be able to move and catch up as far as the backlog we have as far as people waiting to come into the club. Charlie's, of course, advanced programs are going, and we've been adding programs all the time to that. One of the things that's important is that we think about courtesy and the shop courtesy that we have and share with each other. That's something that I think that we all need to keep remembering. We also need to not forget, and we have some examples in this last week, that COVID is still here. In fact, I'm going to be giving the whole presentation this morning because Matt Green has COVID, and he has it pretty badly. He has COVID pneumonia is what he told me he has. So we can all be thinking and praying for him as he comes through this process too. And there are opportunities for all of us to be part of this, and we all, as you know, are already part of that activity. So why is this meeting important? I think it's important because at the beginning of every year, I think we need to do a reset on what we are and what our expectations are as far as the leadership to the volunteers, and also that there's a lot of things that change that we need to be able to have this face-to-face discussion. It's not something that we've had in the past few years because of the COVID environment, and we've done it through video, but I think that it's important that we have this face-to-face discussion. We need to be able to manage the shop in a consistent manner. That's another reason why this meeting is important, that we are looking at and doing things in a consistent way so that the members that are looking to us as the leaders and that are leading the shop, they look to us and see that there's something consistent. We need to make sure everybody's abiding by the rules and that we're treating members with the same respect that we would expect ourselves. Like I said, all eyes are really on us. People look to us, and when we do something that's contrary to what we're training or what we've told on our storyboards, then there's questioning as to whether we are taking this seriously. And so I think it's really important that we stay consistent. One of the things that I really think is important also is that as P-carders, we have a privilege in this shop. We've been given a privilege. But what that privilege means that we should be also helping each other in that privilege. And so on days when we have P-card days, we shouldn't be thinking about how to get away so we don't have to close the shop or clean up the shop or whatever. We should be thinking about how can we help that person that may end up being there at the end of the day so that his job or her job isn't as difficult as it could be. And so we need to think about helping each other in that process. And as I said, it's a privilege that you've been given the P-card. It's not an entitlement. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. In other words, it's something that there's an expectation to get a P-card. You need to meet that expectation in order to keep the P-card. So what is that commitment? It's a pretty simple commitment, really. It's 48 hours of volunteer time during the year, 24 of which have to be in one of those frontline positions of manager, assistant manager, mentor, or an instructor. So what comes with that commitment or responsibility? Before I go there, I'm going to ask a question. Could everybody in the room that's a manager raise their hand? Okay, so there are a lot of people that didn't raise their hand. In reality, every single one of your hands should have gone up just now. As a P-carder, you are a manager. That's the whole concept of a P-card, is that as a P-carder, you have the responsibility to manage the shop. At any time when you're in there as a P-carder, you could be asked to take on that responsibility. And if you don't take that responsibility, you don't see that that's your responsibility. Speak into the microphone. Okay, can you hear me now? Or should I hold it? Is that going to cause you a problem, Ed? Okay. Because I got two mics on right now. Okay. So what I was saying is that the P card has a responsibility of potentially being the manager of the shop. And so I should have seen every hand go up when I said, how many of you are managers? Because you all are managers. And you should be able to feel comfortable and confident in being able to open and close the shop and to manage the shop when someone asks you to take the red apron. So that's one of the things that you need to understand as a P-carder. You're taking on a responsibility also. Okay? So, as I said, the responsibility is that you are, when you're called upon to be the red apron, you're the manager. The other part of it is that when you come into the shop, if you're the first one in the shop during the day, on a P-card day, you are the red apron, or should be assuming the red apron. If you come into the shop, you should, as a P-carder, should be searching out the person that is the current P-card to see if that's the red apron, and being willing to take over the red apron from that person. That way we share the responsibility. And if someone asks you to take the red apron, I would hope that you'd be willing to take it. If you don't take it and stay in the shop for a period of time after that, you may be questioned as to why you didn't take it, because I believe that we should all be able to take on that responsibility of the P-card. We should also, like I say, we should also be looking to assist the other P-carders that are in the shop. If you're a red apron, if someone's a red apron, as a P-carder, we should be looking to assist and help that person in anything. So if he comes to you, or he or she comes to you and wants to delegate a responsibility or ask you to do something, you got to consider it like that's the manager asking you to do something, because that's their responsibility. They're leading the shop. And of course, you need to be able to open and close the shop on it. But another part of it, that's something that, I haven't changed. I'm still on the same slide. Oh, I guess I haven't. Okay, there you go. I'm sorry. Thought I'd changed it. You have to be able to open and close the shop, and that includes filling out the log. That's one of the things that we haven't been doing a good job of lately, is filling out on P-card days the change of leadership in the shop. Yeah, we might update the whiteboard, but we're not updating the white sheet. And as things happen in the shop, we need to have a record who's the manager at that particular point in time in the shop. So that's why we have the log. So we need to make sure that we're updating that. So what is a manager's responsibilities? You're supposed to, this again kind of gets back to overarching manager responsibilities, but they really fall across all of the responsibilities of P-card too. You got the full control and responsibility of the shop. You are, in the case of during the normal daily operation of the shop, during open shop days, you're the person that supervises the tool room monitor, the mentors, the front desk attendants, and the lathe mentors. In other words, They all answer to the shop manager. So that gets to another question or another point of view that we saw hands go up that said, how many of you are managers? And I would ask the second question, how many of you think you're assistant managers? Okay, I'm going to step back from that one and say that you're all, again, managers. There's no difference between a manager and an assistant manager in the fact that you're all still responsible for running the shop. And yes, there may be managers that have more seniority or have been doing it longer than someone else, but you're really a team, two people working together to manage the shop. And so as a manager or assistant manager, you should be working together to run the shop. It shouldn't be, I have the responsibility for the trash cans because I'm the assistant manager or the bag. I mean, it should be responsibilities are the same. We should be sharing those responsibilities and making sure that they're accomplished during the day. That same thing comes to when you're looking when Matt is looking for assignments of managers. He's looking to assign managers to the shop, and one day you may be the assistant manager, the next day you may be the manager, and sometimes that may mean that there's a more senior person as assistant manager than there is a manager that's a less seniority. That doesn't make any difference. You should be, again, working together as a team to manage the shop, and there shouldn't be any issues between you as far as that's concerned. So again, I mean, you see the list up there. I think a lot of you are familiar with it. Limited assistance to the members seeking help, maintaining that the shop is being safely operated. We know all about the safety requirements, shoes, eyewear, etc. You're also the incident commander if something happens in the shop. If something was to occur and an injury or some kind of an accident occurred, you're the one that's supposed to take control, and you're supposed to, again, give directions to those people that are part of your team. You make sure that all the equipment that's in the shop is being managed, locked out as necessary when repairs required, and that the maintenance forms that are required are filled out. You've got to make sure that people are qualified to use the tools. That becomes the biggest part, I think, is in the area of the lathes, making sure that the people that are on the lathes have a certain level of certification. That'll be becoming a new requirement as we start to move toward our new technologies, even though most of those people will be Tech SIG members. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be checking to make sure that person has the appropriate stamps or whatever is required to be able to use that equipment. In most cases, they can't get to it because it's locked out. But again, in the lathe area, it's more important, I think, than anything else. And that's something the lathe mentor helps the manager in being able to manage that particular responsibility. And then at the end of the day, essentially being able to open and close the shop and complete the necessary documentation that's required to support that. So most of you have got your new badges today. I know that the badges might not have completely been stamped appropriately. If they aren't, please let me or Kathy or whatever know, because I know that there were probably a couple of cases in the area of lathe that maybe they don't have the full certification stamp on your badge, or you may not have a T on your badge or whatever. Bring your old badge, your new badge. We'll sit down, we'll work through that and get that resolved, okay? We just had the P-card meeting the other day, so we had to get those stamped. I think it was yesterday that she was finishing that up, so.
What's a T?
T stands for tour guide. That means that you're available to basically do a tour of the shop. And those are only the people that should be given the tours of the shop, or those that have a T on their badge. Here are some of the other areas we're going to talk about this morning. Diminished skill, prickly members, again, the code of conduct. those are the things. Some of these charts were shown last year. But what I'd like to do is I'm going to talk through a couple of areas that each of the various sections in that have responsibility wanted to pass down to you, and I'm going to pass those down. The first area is the front desk. On a P-card or a training day, we have pretty limited things that should be being accomplished by a P-card person. You do answer the phone, and make sure that the doors are kept locked and that there's no non-members in the lobby. That's really kind of the things that you would do as it relates to the front desk. The things that we shouldn't be doing are trying to sell stock or items that are in the lobby, taking any kind of payments, taking any kind of furniture repairs or special projects, or releasing those to the customers that have come in asking for that work to be done. And we don't do tours. And the reason we don't do that is because there are certain procedures and et cetera the front desk people have to go through in order to complete their paperwork. And I can promise you as P-carders, we don't know all that requirement, all those things, and we don't. So we can't do it appropriately, and that just causes extra work for those that have to come behind it and pick up the documentation. The next area is the commitments on the open days when the shop is open. If there's not a front desk attendant when the shop is ready to be opened, or they are late, then it's the manager's responsibility to see if they can find someone that would be willing to sit at the desk and do that responsibility. There is a limited, I guess, instructions for people that have to do that. If there is, I mean, it's going to minimize what has to be done. There is a folder there that talks to a plan for a sub that's going to work the desk if they have to. Once there is coverage, the manager should contact the front desk administrator and make sure that there's a training that been done available to cover that for that shift. If someone doesn't show up and they can't find someone in the shop to do it, the manager has the ability to shut the shop down and say we can't open the shop. Again, it's just like not having a manager or assistant manager. We can decide at that point in time whether the shop can be opened or closed. So again, it's important if you have that assignment that you're there and meet that assignment. As far as tools and equipment, this is from the tool. I'm trying to think if this is. I guess this is from Don, and this is your comments. That all machines are, well, this is really more in the area that Fran has, that all of our tools are set up properly for use. We're not responsible for doing anything as far as adjusting. That's the maintenance team's responsibility. All jigs and sleds are set up and used correctly. That's what they do. We need to make sure that they're all being placed back in their proper place and configured for the next person to use them. All machines and tools and work areas are thoroughly cleaned. This is something that I find that we're probably the least good at during P-card days is cleaning up after ourselves. And we tend to move from station to station and forget about that there's a cleaning requirement that we need to be following up. And again, we're setting an example. If we're doing it, the people that are being trained around us will see that and they will do the same thing. So, and if you don't think that's true, just go in the shop and watch. And when people see us do something and then someone calls them on it, they'll say, well, that other person there that I saw that a P-card was doing that. So I've heard that more than once. So, I mean, we need to be conscious of the fact that we are examples. All tools, of course, need to be returned in the proper condition and cleaned, et cetera, if they need to be cleaned. We need to remind the tool room monitors that in addition to maintaining the order in the tool room itself, that they have responsibility to do other things in the shop, which are like cleaning the clamps, making sure glue bottles are taken care of, stocking the consumables, and then maintaining and organizing the tool room. So as this is something that I think as P-carders during P-card days, we need to be just as cognizant of, in the sense that if we're emptying glue bottles, we need to make sure that we're filling glue bottles at the end of the day, or someone does that, because don't forget the next day is an open shop day and they have to come in and do that. And I mean, we need to treat the shop like it is, like the way we'd want to see it when the next morning when we open the shop, you know, and that it's ready for use by the next group.
Hey Tim, how about if a P-carder sees a tool room monitor who doesn't understand something? What should we be doing?
So the question is, what should we do if we see someone that's a tool room monitor that isn't doing what they should be doing, or
doesn't understand, say, a
tool. Doesn't understand a tool, etc. My answer to that question would be, and it's one of the things we actually tell people in training, is that the tool room is an opportunity to come in and learn about the shop and more about the shop. And so we actually encourage people to become tool room people, because they will learn more about it. So I think that I think it's our responsibility, if they're not doing something, to share with them. And if they aren't willing to listen to that, then I would say that you need to talk to Don or someone like that that's in charge of the tool room, and share that there's a concern there. But again, anything that we have the opportunity to share and help those people learn about what they're supposed to be doing. Maintenance. As we all know, we have a formal time on Saturdays from 8 to 10 when maintenance is being done. It would have been done this morning, but you're all here, or some of you are here. There is also midweek things that are done to the shop as far as blade changes. And then there is work that is done between Saturday and Saturday by Fran's team as they work off the maintenance cards that are written. So there is also things that Fran's team schedule to work during the week because it can't get accomplished on Saturday. And those things, they try to work around the schedule so that we don't interfere with shop operations. This is the list of people that actually have the ability to do things or perform maintenance during the day. And so if something was to happen on a tool and one of these people was in the shop, they have the ability, if they're willing, to go do this repair. But again, that doesn't mean that they're going to, but that does mean that they do have the ability. If something comes up and you see one of them in the shop, you might, as a manager or as a P-card, you can always go to them and ask if they can look into it. Like I said, that doesn't assure that they're going to necessarily take care of it right that time, but they are there and available for you to do that. Taking a machine out of service. If the machine is unsafe or not functioning, we want to take it out of service, okay? Because we don't want it to prevent injury or further damage to the piece of equipment. That means we need to lock out the machine. We need to write the appropriate documentation to identify what it was that occurred, so that it can be repaired appropriately. We tell the people during training that when you put a waiting maintenance sign on a tool, that's exactly what it means. It's awaiting maintenance. And so I wouldn't like to see someone removing that sign and go ahead and using the tool thinking that they know more about it than someone else does. If it's been written up and locked out, you shouldn't be using it. I think most of you are familiar with this form. It needs to be filled out completely and enough that Fran's team can be able to do the work on it. It's important that your name and number are on there, and so that he can contact you or they can contact you if they have questions. So this safety, we should always be thinking about and preparing ourselves for the potential of an emergency. Not that we should be, uptight about that, but we should be prepared for it in case something comes about. So we should be thinking about how we can clearly identify who we would ask to help us if something was to happen in the shop. Be prepared to delegate responsibilities for certain things. One of the things that's come up recently is being responsible for handling the phone during a 911 call. The person that's in charge of the incident, or that's with the person that's maybe down or whatever the reason it is, they need to have the phone so that they can be telling the person that's 911 operator the condition of that person. It shouldn't be someone at the front desk who's having to have information relayed to them. It should be that one of the mobile phones should be with the person that's managing the incident or the accident. And it may require shutting the shop. It does require the shutting the shop down if we're going to call 911, because we need to basically secure the shop and secure it so that 911 can do whatever they have to do. And one of the more important things, and I really would stress this, is that once the situation is under control or being managed, that you do contact a board member and make sure, at least a board member, but I'd like to personally be contacted so I'm aware that that's happened, because the community could be calling, asking questions. I don't want to be caught by surprise, getting a phone call and say, what happened with this person, and I have no idea that someone went down in the shop. So I really appreciate that one of the board members, usually if you call one, we're going to call each other and let each other know so that we're aware of it, okay? Just overall shop administration, we should just be aware and make sure that things that are being used are being put back, risers are being put away, that carts are stored in the appropriate place, that they're just not pushed off into the furniture area or whatever, that they're stored at the end when the end of the day comes, etc. That, again, reminding people that it's their responsibility to pick up after themselves, clean up after themselves, and don't be afraid to approach someone that forgets to do that, because they need to be reminded. And we need to make sure all the paths to the exits are clear so that people can exit the building if we needed to. Question? Yeah, Ralph?
Let's go back one to safety.
Yep.
In the event of an accident, there is a report that the shop manager
Yep.
or the P card person in charge is to complete.
Yes.
Not only does he or she complete the report, but if you have your phone with you and the camera, then you can take pictures
Sure.
of the event.
That's all part of the incident book, incident commander's book, that there instructions on what you should be doing. And you're right. And the question really was that there is a report that needs to be filled out when there is an accident, an incident report that needs to be filled out. And the more documentation that you can produce, the better it is. So if there are photographs taken or et cetera, you need to be able to provide those.
Possibly in that same book or at the manager's desk, if we could have a sheet that has all the board of directors' names and phone numbers
Yep.
there in the event that you have to call somebody.
That's on the wall inside at the front desk. So it's there on the wall, right there by as you walk into where the front desk administrator is, right there below our pictures is all of our phone numbers. Of course, this is the things that we need to do when we open the shop, just to check to make sure that we have the announcement system working, and also what kind of announcements we would make if we had an emergency that we needed to address. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and this is the manager's form. This is being updated as we speak. There are some things that have been asked to be removed by maintenance because they believe that we don't need to be doing them anymore, and that there are things that are going to be added to this because of the new equipment that's being added in the shop that are going to be responsibilities for the manager to check end of the day, end of shift. So I can't stress enough that we make sure that we are filling this out, that we are basically identifying red apron changes as they occur. The other thing is that we need to think about P-card days as the same thing as a normal open shop day. So when noon comes or 1 o'clock comes, we should be turning the sheet over, and we should be basically starting to record our activities on the back as far as closing and afternoon shift type stuff. So instead of, if you look at the list where the last red apron entrance is, I can see that a lot of times we continue to write names down into the text below it. We could use the back side and just start in the back part of the day. That's the other side of it. This is something that managers are going to be responsible for doing. If you're been given the assignment by Matt to have someone, or basically mentor someone, or that is shadowing to become an assistant or a manager, I should say. This is an evaluation form that we're going to be doing, and this is a way of us to determine how people are progressing in their shadowing, and also to determine when a person may be ready to take on the responsibility of being a manager. So as a manager that's been given someone to shadow them, you're going to be asked to fill this out at the end of that particular period and put it in Matt's box so that Matt can review it, and then possibly get with the person that's shadowing and talk to them about areas of improvement or things that they're doing that are doing well. But it also helps us to determine when that person is ready to take on that responsibility. Okay, one of the other responsibilities that we have is that we need to be prepared as managers to brief the personnel as to what to do if we were to evacuate. At the manager station, there is an evacuation plan, but you can see here what responsibilities each person has to, and they need to make sure that people are ready to take on that assignment. So as the manager, you should be checking with each of these people at the start of your shift and making sure that they are aware of their responsibility in case of an evacuation. And then the evacuation plan is there. It talks about how to evacuate the building. That's at the manager station. Storyboards, of course, we've all know about them and how to use them. But I would encourage everyone to take an opportunity to review them. I mean, I know that they're located on the OneDrive. Are they not, George?
I believe they're on the main Sun City.
Sun City website also?
Yeah, Larry puts them out there.
Okay.
On both websites.
Okay. So I'd encourage everyone to make sure that you occasionally go out there and just look through them. It's a way of just refreshing yourself on the requirements that we are expecting our members to adhere to when they're using those tools. I just would encourage everyone to take time to look at those because they do change. I mean, they have some changes lately, especially with the addition of the two new the second saw stop in the shop. We have some requirement changes on the table saws that have come out lately, and then we have some new sleds. this is kind of a repeat of what I've said already, in that the first person that comes in as a P carder is responsible for taking on the red apron, that you're not involved in training. We don't want our training instructors to have to have the P card, have the red apron, excuse me, on those days when the shop is open for both. They will take it at the end of the day. If the end of the day ends up being that there's no other P carders in the shop, then an instructor will take it. We'd like it to be an advanced training instructor first, and then a cluster/practicum instructor would be the second choice. I know that quite often, because of my lathe classes run later in the afternoon, I get that responsibility late in the days on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's fine if the shop is empty of P carders. That's the way it should be. So one of the things that is tough to deal with, but it is something that we all are in that age and stage of our lives when our skills start to diminish, okay? And as we are working in the shop, we may encounter people that we think that that's occurring with. And we, as managers of the shop on those particular days, we have a responsibility to make sure that the overall shop is safe, and if we feel someone else is having a problem that could endanger them or someone else, we need to be able to document. There is a form in our shop report that we can do. We can write that up, especially if there's an incident where we see it's something that it's important that we write it up, we will. And that report is then provided to the safety administrator and the shop administrator, and then the director, managers, and mentors. That way we can address those issues within the shop. Yes?
Exactly.
That form, it should be in the manager's book, that form there, but if it's not, it's in the forms drawer inside the main office, okay? The form number is there, and that form number is the form that you would fill out, okay? The question is, where is that form at? And the answer is it, yes?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the having an incident in the shop.
Yes, sir.
You don't have to close the shop.
You don't have to, but if
Isolate where the incident is, tape it off, take your pictures, do whatever you got to do. You don't necessarily have to close the shop.
you're gonna shut the shop down for during that period of time until we can determine whether the incident needs to be cleared. George, you want to speak to that more?
Anytime 911 calls, all activities in the shop have to stop. Depending on how bad the incident was,
We can reopen, but I'm saying that we need to basically stop operations in the shop so that we're not, again, people are distracted at that point in time. And so we want to make sure that the shop is properly being managed. And when the manager's focus is now on the incident, the shop can't be managed properly.
But every incident doesn't require a 911.
Yeah, okay, and like I say, when it's a 911, I said that, when a 911 call is, the shop should be shut down, okay? Until we clear the incident and we're confident that that the shop can be back and operational. But yeah, there are gonna be incidents where something happens where 911 may not be called, but we need to cordon off the area, like you said, yellow tape it or whatever, and work the area. But I would say most often when something like that happens, there probably is injury that's going to be requiring a 911. Yes?
Yeah, just don't confuse shutting down the shop temporarily with closing the shop for
Right.
the rest of the day.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when we're not talking about closing, we're talking about basically just ceasing operation during the time that the investigation is being taken care of. And then once the shop is cleared again, we'll be back to normal operations. I don't want to use George's term, but cleaning the blood up off the floor is we got it done before we make sure the shop is open again. But George says that during BOSS to scare people, so. Yeah, Gary.
What if the person on the floor doesn't want you to call 911?
Okay, so that's an interesting dilemma that we've just encountered recently, where we had that situation. His question is, what happens if someone is someone requests that you not call 911? Yeah.
I was an EMT for 6 years. You find that with a lot of people. They don't want to go to the hospital. They don't want EMS. They're not always in the right frame of mind to make a decision regarding their personal safety.
Okay.
If there's an issue, call EMS, let them make the determination.
Okay, and that's what we're gonna, okay, that's what's happened. We've had that situation happen recently. That person on the other end of the line now has the ability to make that decision and can tell us that they're not gonna roll, okay? But we're still gonna call 911 in most cases, but if that person says that and the person that's on the other end of the line has made the determination based on what we've given them that we're okay, then they may not roll. Yes, George?
I was just gonna say, you look at what the cost of them are. If you call 911 and they roll, and they look at the person and say, why don't you go to the emergency room with your doctor, it costs you nothing. If you don't call 911 and something deteriorates to where somebody gets hurt, that's on you.
Yeah.
It costs nothing to call 911.
So I would state that our position is 911 is called when we think that the situation requires 911. Okay? And that's our number one thing, okay? We've had a case recently where the person when we were on the phone said, I'm okay, call my wife, and the EMT person at the other end of the line, they terminated the call with us based on the information we gave them. Just a minute, okay? So this is a new situation that we're dealing with George did some research and found out that in fact that's the policy that's now in place, that can occur, where in the past that was not the case, that when you called 911, they rolled no matter whether, they just needed to know the state and continued to know the state of the person that the 911 call was on, but they still rolled. And like George says, it doesn't cost us anything unless that person has to be transported or has to have medications passed. Otherwise, it's a no-cost run for us, and it's the safest way for us to solve the problem is to roll 911 and to have them there, because we can't, unless, our doctors in the group, there's a few of those that could help us with those situations. We still don't want them to have that responsibility. That's the responsibility of the EMS person. Yes, Sean?
We've had two situations in the last 5 or 8 years where we called 911, we've gone through all the procedures, and the guy on the floor refuses to go with them. They will not take him. So now you've got the guy there laying on your floor sick. You don't want our people to take him home because you don't want the liability, but the ETs will not take somebody who refuses to go.
I understand that, and we have to deal with those situation by situation.
Right. Been in that field for 32 years. Call EMS, like you said. EMS gets there, they evaluate that patient. That patient is not making any sense or refuses, and in their judgment, he needs to go, they will take it. If they don't need their help, he has to be able to provide, that person has to be able to say, they're coming to pick me up in whatever period of time. If they can't do that, EMS will take it.
Did you hear that?
Because they cannot be able to see.
Yeah, and and we want them there too, because we want them to be making those decisions, not us.
I'm sorry, you said what's new is them deciding whether or not they're.
Up until recently, that wasn't something that a call could be terminated by an operator. In other words, that they could terminate a call. Once a call's been made, the call had to be completed to a dispatch, okay? That's different. That's something that they've changed recently because of the amount of calls, if you want to call it, the calls that didn't need to have them in the end, okay? So they've been trained to basically be able to handle those situations. Yes,
Basically, our responsibility is one, call 911, two, call the emergency number we have.
Right.
Beyond that point, our responsibility kind of ends.
yeah, and in most,
EMS, it's up to the family to deal with it then.
yeah, and in most cases, we're going to find out that recently in most of the calls that we've had, before we even had a chance to call the emergency number, the local EMS group is so trained and understands what our badges mean that they're actually making those phone calls before we even get to them, because they looked at our badge and they basically make those calls. So that is something that is occurring. Yes.
Yeah, hi Tim. Is there an expectation on the management as to a responsibility for designating the witnesses of an accident?
Yes, of course, as part of the, again, the question is there any responsibility on the managers to identify and get information from witnesses to what might have occurred? And yes, that's part of the overall incident commander's responsibility, is to find out if, that's why during boss training, when we train our new members, one of the things we tell them is that to stay around and not to leave the shop or leave the area, because we may want to interview them and ask if they can give us information that will support that overall investigation. So yes, it is important that, and it's on the form too, but I mean, it is, you know, something that we need to be aware of. If we see people around that we think might have witnessed what was going on, we want to make sure that we capture them and capture their input.
Is that form on a slide?
No, it isn't.
Isn't there like a little briefcase with all the stuff?
Yes, there is.
in it? So everything that you need to know is in that briefcase?
Yes.
So whatever forms or
Yep.
paperwork or whatever is there, it's under the manager's stand, it's on that little shelf, that's what you should be grabbing
Exactly.
in an emergency. That's what you.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Kathy. Did you hear what she said?
I
Okay.
have my teacher voice on.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so in addition, I really want to go forward a couple slides. This is what the code of conduct is for, that's been passed down, that we all get in our handbooks every year and our fee schedules, that there's a code of conduct for the community. These are the things that are written in there, and you can read through these. We are going to put this presentation out there on the website, so you'll be able to see it. But the one that's important is says that any member who conducts him or herself in an unbecoming manner or who violates the code of conduct shall be subject to sanctions. This is in the overarching community code of conduct, okay? So if we go back, if we encounter someone in our shop that we believe is acting inappropriately or is behaving in an unsafe manner, we need to address that as managers. If that person doesn't want to leave the shop when we've asked them to, we can call Securitas to come and help us with that situation. Again, we're not to try to get into a conflict with that person. We're just trying to, if you want to call it, deal with the situation and address it in a calm manner as best we can. We shouldn't get into a shouting match or an argument or whatever. If someone acts inappropriately, we don't feel comfortable with it, again, as a member, we should be going to a manager and saying, I'm not, comfortable with what's happened over there. Let the manager take on the responsibility. And if it doesn't, if the situation hasn't been dealt with in a way that security can be called to address that. There is an incident report, again, that we can fill out that would identify that, so that could be dealt with as far as the overall organization is concerned. And again, in these kind of cases where these things happen, we do need to have some sort of identification to the shop administrator and to myself, so that we know that this has occurred. I mean, had a situation where one of the members actually called me after this and wanted to have a meeting with me specifically about a situation, and I dealt with it. Yes, Carl?
If a situation like this exacerbates and gets to a point, should the manager cease operations in the shop to avoid distractions?
Well, I mean, I think that the best thing that the manager should be doing is to try to get the person out of the shop and get them to a place away from the rest of the population. I mean, the best you can do. I mean,
If that doesn't happen.
I mean, by that time, I'm hoping that you've already called security and that they're there to help you with that situation. I mean, you've always got the opportunity as the manager to shut the shop down. I mean, or to cease operations. I mean, again, if they feel the shop is unsafe, we need to address that as far as managers are concerned. So we've gone through those. This is just kind of a catch-all chart. You can use, if you can use a gift certificate to buy wood. I think all you have to do is on there, you just have to identify in Woodroom the gift certificate number and the value that gift certificate holds, and then it can be used to, and then I think you subtract from whatever the gift certificate value is, and then you just keep track of the difference so that if there's remaining value, that'll be there for another use. If it's used completely, then you'll have to cover the difference in the cost. As a manager, it's really important that we try to be there, a half an hour at least before the shop opens, so that we make sure that we've gone through all these steps that we're talking about. When we have days where we have non-members in the shop and we are,
Concern we had,
yeah,
just showed up.
yeah. There's been a couple of situations recently where we've had a P carder in the shop with a yellow card person there, and they were working together, and that's not appropriate on a P card day. I mean, it's a P card day only. A yellow card would be there only is if they're working on a special project and they're working with the P card member to complete that special project. But if you're there and you're making shelves together for someone's project and the project is for the person that holds the yellow card, that's not supposed to be happening, okay? I mean, you've been given a privilege, and that's the P card to be able to be in the shop, but that doesn't mean the yellow card person has that same privilege. If they're assisting, like it says there, on a guild product or working on something, I mean, we actually have had at point in time people working mailboxes, etc., that were yellow card people that were assisting in basically doing that work. That's acceptable. Arrive 15 minutes before your afternoon shift because the shop has already been open, so you're basically just taking over. Again, I can't reiterate it enough. Share the responsibility of the red apron during the day. I don't want to say that it could happen, but I personally believe that if you're asked to take the red apron and you don't take the red apron and you're in the shop for anything more than 15 or 20 minutes longer, then you've basically you're abusing your privilege as a P carder. And that I think that we need to share that responsibility and not expect the people that are there all the time to be the people that are handling the red apron. I know Jay's great. When Jay walks in on a training day, he picks up the red apron, he takes it over, but that doesn't mean that the next person that comes in shouldn't go over to Jay and say, hey, Jay, you want me to take the red apron? That should just be a normal thing that we do, is that when we come into the shop, we should search out the red apron and see if you can take on that responsibility. Number one, it's good for us all to learn to be that responsible person. It's important. We also should be out there Matt wanted to make sure that we're out there recruiting, I know that we recruit through the training program, For instructors, I think we need to be always looking, and if we see and identify people that we think would make a good manager or assistant manager or a mentor or even an instructor. I mean, we need to be identifying those to the various directors so they know who they might be. And I've said this enough as far as helping each other during the P-card days, that we help the Red Apron basically do their job. Any questions above and beyond what everybody's asked so far? Ralph?
Tim, could you make mention of the valuable commodity that we have in the shop of the TV cameras that capture each?
Yes. So the question is, can I discuss the fact that we have a very, very high-quality recording system that records all the things that are happening on the tools, and that they're there so that we can use them to go back and look at situations and et cetera. And don't not take advantage of those tools, because they're there, and that's what they're there for, is so that when an incident occurs, again, back to the comment about getting witness information, that's another form of information that we'll use, is we'll go back and use the cameras that are on the particular tools or in the particular areas to go back and see what really happened. We don't have the verbal conversation of what's going on, but we do have the visual of seeing what's going on. I mean, I know Ed and I went through looking at one the other day. You know, you don't verbally know what happens, but we do know that something did happen, so we can address those situations. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you comment on our policy of somebody, a member coming in and hasn't been there for an extended period of time and wants to cut a 2x4 or whatever?
Okay.
It was like a 6-month.
Yeah, I mean, we have a flag in the system that basically will say when a person tries to badge in and they haven't been there for a period of time, it'll come up and it'll tell us that that person is not there, hasn't been there. I think it's the responsibility of the front desk person to let the manager know that that person is there, number one. Number two, Mike would want to make sure that they're a member still, because if they haven't been paying their dues, they shouldn't be accessing the shop either. So again, as a manager, we're supposed to just to deal with each situation as they come up, but I would say that we're gonna quiz that person and make sure that they're ready and capable of using the shop before they come in.
I thought there was something we had to have the mentor watch the person while they're there.
Well, I mean, that would be something that the manager would make the decision on, if whether, based on what their knowledge of the person would be, is assign a mentor or assign someone to make sure that they're properly doing the job that they're doing. Yes, Kathy?
Is there a list of people who do have a Red Cross on their?
There is a list. I mean, we keep a list that has, I mean, we have a list within the management team that we know exactly who has the cross on their badge.
Well, that would be available to you on your ID card and the Red Apron.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is you should be able to look at their badge, and find the badge, and it has the markings on it. I mean, if their markings, the badge hasn't been appropriately updated, let's make sure they get updated. But that's why we put it on the badge, because we can't keep a list running with this all the time. I mean, there's a lot of different managers in and out of the shop. Yeah, Kathy?
To that, with that Red Cross, can you explain, I was under one impression, but I found out that's not the case. What does that Red Cross mean exactly?
I'm going to let George answer that one. I'm not even going to get close to that one.
The Red Cross means that someone has self-identified that they have talents and skills that would help during an emergency.
And are willing to.
Okay, so
No, but they are not required, everyone is operating on the Good Samaritan Act. Anyone with the Red Cross can say, I'm not having a good day, I don't want to help you, that's fine. But there are people who have all kinds of different backgrounds, who feel that in an emergency they can add 5 to 7 minutes of top quality first aid. But I would recommend, as a shop manager or assistant manager, is if you see one of those people and you don't know who they are, go shoot the bull for 4 or 5 minutes. All you guys, men and women both, are great at shooting the bull. So talk to them. you can find out that some of the people here who are very quiet are phenomenally talented. If you talk to them, again, before there's an emergency, you should have a real good idea of who to call if something's happened. But they have just self-identified that they have talents and skills that they feel will be helpful. And in a number of situations, they have really shown to be very, very valuable. But the big thing, and I don't want to go, but they say stewardess is an airplane to assess everybody that comes through the door. Who can I depend on in an emergency? As a manager, assistant manager, you should be doing the same thing. Who am I going to call if I got a problem? And so that's all.
So that's kind of a good segue into what we're going to talk to next. And so we're going to take a couple minute break here while we switch microphones from me to Jim Thompson, who's going to come up and talk about some first aid awareness activities, as well as I think we're going to show a video right after that of the AED operations and CPR. Since you're all managers, you probably should see all that. And then the last, we'll come back and we're going to show a video presentation that Jay did of how to use the new sleds with the saw stops that I think we all need to watch as managers, so we're aware of how to operate and set up the tool for. One of the things that Kathy just mentioned, I'm going to mention it now, and we can mention it again. If in fact you want to have a Red Cross put on your badge because you feel comfortable taking on that responsibility, please get with George Creek, and George will do that, and then they'll generate a list that we'll pass on to Mike, so that will go on the overall list of recorded people.
The best thing to do is email me. My name is in the plank.
Yep.
So just send me an email and we'll get you fixed up. Thank you.
Okay. So with no further ado, here's Jim Thompson.
Thanks, Tim. Can you guys hear me now? No. So I do have to use two mics, Ed? Okay. Good morning. I'm hopeful that in the next 3 hours I'll be able to give you some first aid awareness. If I move too much, Ed, let me know. But we're going to just do a quick overview. And one of the things I'd like to amplify was a couple of points that were made. The first is, when I'm playing the role as an official shop manager, a yellow apron in the shop, I'm watching badges as they come through the door. And one of the things I'm looking for is who's got Red Crosses on their badge. And just taking a mental note of who those people are. I may or may not engage them, but the point is I now know who my resources are. In the case that I might need their help, we might have a situation where one or more members need attention, and I know who I can call on. So that's just one of those mental notes. And then the other thing I'd like to make, the other observation is having the Red Cross is an indication of willingness, but not an obligation, to George's point. You may not feel up to it. It may be a situation that you think is beyond the scope of your training and you don't want to engage, but you are a resource that's available. So I encourage folks that feel like they can help to do so. My background is I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not an EMT. I was a first aid trainer for the Red Cross for a little more than a decade. I've taught community first aid courses, which I normally would talk about how to call 911 and not get anything on you classes. They're pretty light. I've taught remote and wilderness first aid courses where the practitioner is expected to give care for an extended period of time, 6, 8, 12 hours before that they can expect help. So that's my background. It's more of a training background. I have had to use the skills I've acquired over the years in the wild, and there's nothing quite like having to bring those skills to bear in the moment. It turns out being muscle memory. It's amazing to see those kinds of things kick in. So I chose just a couple of things out of the community first aid course to kind of review. These are things that we might see in our demographic and in our situation. So I'm going to talk about diabetic emergencies, fainting, stroke, and heart attack, and then we'll talk about CER and AED. Most of this it's really about the observations that you can make to note that these things are happening, not that you're going to give care. We've got good emergency response here. The EMS response time that I've observed at the shop is less than 10 minutes when there's a unit at the back door ready to give care. That's extraordinary and something to depend on. But you may find yourself in other situations in other places where it's not so good. But we get great care. So it's really about observing and seeing that something is developing and engaging and being able to activate the EMS system more than anything else. So the first one we'll talk about is diabetic emergencies. This is either low or high blood sugar. And you'll see in the individual, you'll notice that they become unresponsive, which for many of us is a default state. So you're really looking for the delta between the normal unresponsiveness and the unresponsiveness that's being observed. Often swallowing difficulty will accompany this, and that's another signal that you might see. You can give a small amount of sugar, and people will ask me, and I know there's doctors and nurses and such in the audience, and I always get engaged in some of the things that are prescribed, but for the lay responder, giving a small amount of sugar, a teaspoon in a glass, or a sip of a soda, not a diet soda, obviously, or a fruit juice, it happens. I don't know if we have glucose in the first aid kit or not. We do. We have a glucose tube in the first aid kit that can be used. Someone who's got high blood sugar, the additional sugar you're going to give them is not going to make their problem that much worse. And if they have low blood sugar, it could be the engagement that we're looking for. So you can do those things. If you don't have sugar, then you're going to call 911 as well. So if we think someone is suffering from a diabetic event, it's always good to ask them, do you have diabetes? Engage folks and find out what you can learn from them. They are going to know what it feels like when their sugar is low or their sugar is high, because they've been there. They know it. If they're non-responsive, we'll cover that on another slide. Obviously, if they can't swallow, you're calling 911, and you're going to let the professionals take care of that. The next one is fainting. If someone faints and loses consciousness, the policy of the Guild is we're calling 911. If you discover this in the wild, typically the lay responder manuals will say if they recover within a minute and feel okay, you don't really need to engage 911. You may suggest that they go see someone. Fainting happens for a variety of reasons. But the Guild policy is explicit. You call 911 if someone loses consciousness, even if just for a moment, and we let the professionals deal with that. These slides are going to be available to the community, right? Yes? Okay, so, because I spent a lot of time drawing all these pictures, so I want to make sure everybody gets to see my artwork. Sir?
Would it be beneficial to have a glucagon kit in the shop?
A what kit?
A glucagon.
So we have glucose in the first aid kit, and I think that we can evaluate additions to that. I would encourage you to engage George. As I said, our demographic changes the probability of the things that we'll see. Being all of you being older than me, really tough crowd. In any event, yeah, we can evaluate all of those things, and we do so on an ongoing basis. So I'd encourage you to engage George.
Jim, you have the PA system. You can say, who's got?
Right. Right. Who's got them with them?
You'll be surprised how many in the shop do.
Who's got an extra 50? So that's fainting. Stroke. FAST is the acronym for stroke, and what we're looking for is you can look at somebody, and again earlier I said observational skills are really important. If you see face drooped, and the human body is a wonderful thing, we're symmetrical down the middle. So you got a left side you can compare to a right side for so many things. And so for stroke, one of the things you tend to see is it affects one hemisphere of the brain, and so you'll see a face droop on one side, an asymmetrical looking face. That might be an indication of a stroke. Weaknesses in the arm. I'm going to put the mic down for a moment, but one of the tests we ask people to do is just raise their arms together. And typically you'll see something that looks like that as opposed to looks like that, right? And so that might be an indication. Speech difficulty, that's an obvious one. If you suspect a stroke, call 911. Somebody else, I think Mark mentioned it earlier, if in doubt, just make the call. EMTs have no issue rolling up on a scene, evaluating someone that was called in good faith and saying, yeah, they're actually okay, they'll be fine, they should go see their GP. They have absolutely no heartburn with that whatsoever. And a lot of people in our position are doing an economic calculation in our head. I don't want to pay the ambulance ride to the hospital, is what's going on in your mind is the first thing. You don't pay for the EMS response. You pay for them loading you in the ambulance and taking you to the hospital. Those are two different conversations. So getting a professional on scene fast and letting them make an evaluation and have a conversation with the patient is the right thing to do, and I would encourage folks to do that. Also, in stroke, watch for signs of choking. That's another one. Heart attack and coronary events. So heart attack, there's a variety of folks in the room that have had the pleasure of having a cardiac event and can tell you at length what their symptoms were. They tend to vary. And they vary in males and females. There's different things that you'll experience. But the common one you hear about is the pressure on the chest and things like that. But folks I've spoken to that have had coronary events knew something was wrong. They either knew it in the days leading up to, or they knew it in the moment that something was clearly not right. And so there's a well-established thing called the chain of cardiac survival, and the first 3 steps really go to call 911, start CPR, and get an AED on scene. And that's what we can do as lay responders. We can take care of those things. The rest of it is up to good advanced life support response. We have that. We're lucky to have that in this area. Close coronary care, we have that, and then good aftercare. And those things all taken together are what make people survivors. There's a number of cardiac survivors in this room that are doing quite well. But I think learning the skills of using, especially an AED, people tend to be hesitant to engage with an AED. They walk through the shopping mall or the airport or wherever they may be, and they see them in the alarmed case on the wall, and they think they're for somebody else. They think that AED has been placed there for someone that's not them. In fact, that AED has been placed there for them, and is designed for someone with no training to be able to use it. In the back.
What about the baby aspirin?
The baby aspirin. So I'm not going to go into the details of treating cardiac events, but the question was about baby aspirin or 300 milligrams plus or minus of aspirin. That tends to be something you administer to someone who you think has experienced a heart attack because it has blood thinning properties. But I'm happy to do more in-depth first aid training, but that's not the purpose of what we're going to do today. And that would be in the litany of things you'd consider in someone who's having an event, if they're not allergic. I love that when all the drug ads, they say don't take this if you're allergic to it. Duh. But they have to say it. It's the same with dealing with aspirin. But clearly that's something that is typically administered. Okay, so I don't know what I do to kick the video off. I was going to move to that. Okay, you're going to do it. Hi, my name is Jim Thompson. I've been asked to talk to you about AED use and CPR. If you see someone go down, it's important that we get them help as soon as we can. Send someone to call 911 and send someone to go get the AED in the shop, and we'll show you where that's at. The first thing you want to do is see if they're responsive or non-responsive. If they're non-responsive, you want to immediately start CPR. CPR these days is quite simple. Interlace your fingers and place it on the chest of the patient. CPR currently dictates 30 compressions at about 120 beats per minute. You want to depress at least 2 inches into the chest. For older folks like us, you're likely to hear cracking and you may break ribs. Properly administered CPR is 30 beats per minute, 2 inches deep. If you do this continuously, once you've achieved 30, you can optionally give 2 rescue breaths by tilting back the chin to open the airway, blowing, looking for chest rise, and then immediately returning to chest compressions. 120 beats per minute, 30 chest compressions. You know the Bee Gees' Staying Alive? It's the theme song of CPR. Once you have the AED, you're going to apply it to the patient. I'm going to use a training AED to show you how it works. Then I'll show you the real AED we have in the shop. The AED will look something like this, and we'll have pads that you place on the patient. remove the pads from the AED, and they'll have illustrations on them that tell you where they go. One on the side, and one on the chest.
This is a training device only. No shock will be delivered.
To remove clothing from the patient,
Remove clothing from person's chest.
you use a pair of shears like these. You'll find them along with the AED. You need to remove all
Attach
clothing from
pads
the chest.
firmly to person's chest as shown. Plug-in connector.
The AED will ask you to plug in the connector if
Check
it's not already
connector
plugged
and
in.
pads. Analyzing rhythm. Everyone stand clear.
Stand back from the patient.
Shock advised. Charging. Everyone stand clear. Everyone stand clear. Push the shock button.
So there'll be a shock button on the device. Press it.
Shock delivered. Begin 5 cycles of CPR.
Leave the pads in place.
30 seconds of CPR remain. Analyzing rhythm. Everyone stand clear. Shock advised. Charging. Everyone stand clear. Everyone stand clear. Push the shock button. Shock delivered.
So you've seen the training AED. This is the real AED in the shop. And it really has two parts. There's the AED itself and a companion pack. In the companion pack, you'll find a pair of shears for cutting clothing away, a razor to deal with any chest hair you may run into, a cleaning pad for cleaning the space, a pair of gloves, and a breathing mask if you choose to do rescue breaths along with your chest compressions. They're all packaged in this red package. The AED itself is very similar to the trainer I showed you. You open the AED and then you open its lid and you'll find the pads already connected. You'll find instructions on what it's looking for you to do. Remove the pads, put them on the patient, and these ones are color-coded, yellow for the chest and red for the side. And then you start the AED. And it, like the trainer, will walk you through the process of analyzing the rhythm and indicating whether a shock is advised or not, and having you deliver a shock. In fact, this one does it automatically. It chooses to shock. Questions? Sir?
When the AED gives a shock, the first shock is at once voltage, the second shock would be higher?
No, it's to my understanding, they're constant. They're the same. And I mean, the AED is not always going to offer a shock. It may just tell you to continue CPR. It's looking for a rhythm it can correct. If it can't find that, it's not going to shock for no good reason, if you will. But the shock is constant. The only thing I'll say is some AEDs will have two sets of pads in them, one we call PEDS pads, which are for babies or young children and someone under 12. Don't make the mistake of putting a pediatric pad on an adult. They won't deliver enough, but you can put an adult pad on a pediatric patient. So if you run into an AED and it doesn't have PEDS pads and you're dealing with an infant or a young child, you can use the adult pads. So, Mark just gave me the sign language for sometimes you have to put the side one on the back. There's just not enough body space to get them apart. But good question. It's always constant shock. Any other questions?
How much time do you have with the AED? It seems like it's a slow process.
Yeah, it seems like it's a slow process. So you want to get it on as fast as you possibly can. And it asked me to do, once it did its initial analysis, which was immediate. So as soon as I got it applied, it said, okay, I've done a shock and I haven't got what I want. Give me 5 cycles of CPR. How long is 5 cycles of CPR? It's 30 at 120 beats a minute. It's only a minute later. a minute and a half later, it's going to be looking at shock again. And it's going to do that. Now, there's all kinds of statistics we can quote on survivability and then minutes and all that kind of stuff. But keep in mind, you've got a advanced life support unit en route while you're doing that. So hopefully before you get to 10 minutes, they're there doing their thing as well. Mark.
To qualify a little bit what you said, it is important to get the pads on real quick.
Oh, yeah.
But it's more important to start compression. Somebody
Right.
else can go get the pads.
Right. I'm very happy to do a proper AED and CPR course for anybody that wants it, and we'll do it without giving you a certification because we don't want to do that. But the point is, there's nuance to all of this. When you have two responders, you can be delivering compressions while the other one is setting up the AED and getting it started. And then the other thing you'll tend to do in that kind of environment is trade off on who's doing compressions at the end of every cycle. Because again, I mean, until you've gotten down on the floor and done CPR for 5 minutes, you don't know what it feels like. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the folks that have done it know. But when I teach class, I ask how many people think they can do CPR for half an hour. Because typically I'm talking about folks that are going to be in the backcountry. They're out hiking in the mountains or whatever. Can you do CPR for an hour? No, you can't. You cannot. So it's one of those things that, for us here, it's a 10-minute operation that we're open for. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Tim?
We're going to just show the video on how to set up and use the soft sleds.
Hi, my name is Jay Hubblebank, and today I'm going to show you how to use our new sleds and set the saw stop up for its use. Step number one, always make sure the saw is off when you go anywhere near the blade, and we're definitely going near the blade. Next step, we're only going to raise it slightly so we can get access to the bench, to the kickback dogs. We're going to lock the kickback dogs into that little tab. We're going to raise the blade up, the guard, and remove the throat plate like so. Next, inside the saw, there is a door that allows for proper dust collection. Open the door up, grab the handle, and pull the handle up. That will release the whole assembly. Lift the assembly out, move it out of your way. You're going to take the riving knife, which is stored over here, put the riving knife in the same slot. Don't worry about trying to line it up. Once you go all the way down, it automatically lines up. We're going to lower the handle down again and close the door and put the throat plate back in. Make sure when the throat plate is in, it sits properly. It's supposed to sit flush here. Sometimes when you put it in, if you're not careful, it will sit on top like so, and you can see how it's sticking up. So make sure the throat plate is installed properly. Okay, the sleds are stored underneath saw number 12. So we can pull out the 18-inch. There are handles on both ends so you can grab it. The sleds are a little bit heavier than the old sleds, so just be prepared. And you set it up just like you do on the other sled. You're going to make sure that the guides are in the slots. Raise the blade to the height you need to be able to cut the material you're working with. Which is good. Pull it back, and you're going to set the piece like so. And you're going to cut, holding your piece. You're going to go through. When you get through your cut, you're going to go all the way to the end. Let go. Don't hold on to the sled. Let go, and then shut the saw. Too many people try to hold on to it, maneuver their leg. Don't do that. Let go and shut it. When the blade has completely stopped, that's when you can move your material. Okay, this one works the same as the smaller one. The only difference is we do have some T-tracks in here. We have 2 T-tracks on the bottom and 1 along the front. Purpose of it is that if you wanted to cut repeatedly at a given angle, you can lock this in. Also giving you the ability to use hold downs should you have an odd shaped piece. Slide in from the top. Drag it down to where you need it. And you notice the hold downs we're using here, these are plastic hold downs. These are not the metal hold downs. If the metal hold down should hit the blade, you will trip the blade. The plastic you will not. Worst case scenario, you cut through the plastic hold down. But this is designed so you can turn this and miss the blade. Of course, the long one is a different circumstance because you can go across the blade. But worst case scenario, what you do is you just damage a $20 piece as opposed to a $200 repair. So we do have the stop here. If the stop is in your way, it's easy to remove it, loosen it, slide it all the way to the end, put it out of the way. Now, putting your wood on this side, or you're putting it on this side doesn't really make a difference, but you are going to hold your wood as you cut. Hand here, never put your hand over here. The blade is under here. Though something should not happen, we don't want to take any chances. Hold by the handle, hold here, push through. Again, when you get to the end, take your hands off, shut the saw. We also have a vertical stop, so if you need to, line up the stop where you would need it to be, lock it in, then after you're lined up, lift your piece up, make your cut. Remember, the right side has to float. This allows it to float. Bring it back, move your piece out of the way, lower this down, slide your stock in, lift it up, make another cut. So if you're doing end grain cutting boards, you'll be able to make slices and move your piece away each time, and guaranteed you have the same width of piece. Okay, if you need to cut odd shaped pieces, again, you can use the track, set the odd shaped piece up, lower the hold down, and you can make your cut. I would not recommend a single hold down. I'm just putting single here for the purpose of this video. You'd use a second hold down, and you'd be able to make your cut. Okay, we're going to return the saw to its normal state. Again, make sure that the saw is turned off. Remove the throat plate. Open up that door again. Handle. Remove the riving knife, put it back right now so you don't forget about it and lose it. Going to grab the entire assembly. Put it back in as we did before with the riving knife. All you have to do is set it down. Don't worry about lining up the pins. Lower the handle. Close the door. Install the throat plate. Release the two kickback dogs. Lower. Lock in, and we're done.
Yes, Bob.
Just a quick question to Jay. If you're doing an end grain and you make your first cut, can you bring that sled back with the blade going?
You can, but you shouldn't.
Did you hear the question? The question was, if you're doing an end grain cutting board and you make that cut, can you bring the blade back, sled back, while the blade's still running? And Jay's answer was you could, but you shouldn't.
You'll get a better cut if you leave it at the end.
So you leave, and you're
And that's all in place now?
all the time.
Pardon?
We're ready to go.
So you make your cut, let it come to a stop, pull it back, reset, do another cut. Okay, so we're done in here. Like I said before we started the video, there's 2 rooms, advanced training at this end outside, and then there's, I guess, a question. Advanced training is anybody that's is an instructor for an advanced training class, or going to be. In other words, if you're teaching a class that Charlie basically manages the advanced training, in other words, things that we sign up through Eventbrite for. If you're an advanced training instructor, we're meeting in the breakout room at this end outside of the hallway. If you're an instructor during normal training for clusters and practicum, Ed is going to be meeting with you at the other end of the hallway in another breakout room.
Hello, I'm Charlie Best, the Advanced Training Director for 2023. And I'd like to do a brief presentation talking about advanced training, being an advanced trainer, and some of the overlaps with the red aprons. And sometimes we're the only people left in the shop and need to close it down. Now, I'm not one for long presentations, so I'm going to try and keep my part here focused and short. And since 2022 is behind us, it's time to look ahead for a new year of advanced training. Well, the purpose of this session is to review last year's performance and develop a level set for our expectations and goals for the coming year. We've all been through a lot in the last year, and I fully expect this coming year to have its own share of unexpected opportunities. First, thanks is necessary to the entire group for a range of things. That's thanks for listening to this presentation. Thanks for all your hard work out there doing instruction. There wouldn't be any training if we didn't have you as volunteers, and the entire guild appreciates your efforts. Thanks for your patience in scheduling classes. This year, we've had some things like practicum moving around, impacting our schedule. Fortunately, we have a fairly flexible group, and thanks for addressing some of the student issues that we encountered along the way. Everyone appreciates your patience in making these classes a good experience. Thanks for moving the classes later in the day whenever possible. Some people said it couldn't be done, and yet we've done it. Additionally, we've had several new courses developed during the year, even though our environment was very constrained. As usual, though, if you have ideas for a new class, please let me know as soon as you can. We as volunteers are doing a great job of developing the skills of our guild. I look at every feedback sheet that comes in, and nearly every one of them has a glowing review of the classes provided, and that's, of course, for the work that you guys do. Few offer up even suggestions for improvement. That can be a good thing or a bad thing, though, since there's always opportunities to get better. Make sure you talk to your students about providing feedback for the classes. We have a wide range of classes that continue to grow. We're made up of a group of caring individuals who are willing to take the time to help others improve, as well as look to new ways of doing things. And most importantly, we're doing this all together. My son came to visit one Friday coffees earlier when we had coffees, and he has been teaching schools primarily at the high school level for a very long time. And he said he's never seen a more positive, supportive group. You as advanced trainers should share in the credit for that, since you're giving the ability of the guild to tackle more advanced projects and to help each other. One thing I was asked to remind everybody is about the relationship between the advanced instructors and the red apron. All advanced trainers with a P card must be prepared to perform the roles of startup and shutdown of the shop, as well as emergency response. If you're unsure of that, you can always go through the red apron training again. When you're training and the shop monitor leaves or turns the red apron over to you, you're it. You're the shop manager. You should lock the front door if you desire, but take responsibility. If it's early in the day, you may also need to open up the shop, follow that startup process, or at the end of the day, of course, do the whole shutdown, emptying the bags in the trash. Although one thing I would suggest is if when the shop manager is going to turn something over, ask him, have you emptied the trash? Have you emptied the bag for the vacuum? So that you can concentrate on your class. When another P card holder comes in, if it's an open P card time, you should turn the red apron over to them immediately. If they won't take it, you should ask them to leave. Another item that's important for instructors is to maintain the shop. When the class is over, make sure everything is clean. Engage the students in that cleanup process, since it's essentially part of what they'll need to know about the tools you're showing them how to use. If it's a P card day or after hours, you got to check the barrel and all the equipment, make sure the blast doors are closed, all that kind of good stuff. Just follow the process. Connect. If there's other classes going on, you got to connect with the other instructors that are around so that they know that they now have the responsibility if you're done. And you were the acting shop manager. If something's broken, make sure you write up a damaged or failed equipment report and notify or put the notation in the manager's report for the end of the day. And double check that any controlled equipment that you were using is locked out. When you're buying lumber or materials for a guild class, that is reimbursed. On the lumber purchase form, you can see there's a place where you can mark it as a guild item that has the type of transaction, as well as you should always fill in the project name. There were a few times in the past year where these forms were entered without all the necessary information for it to be tracked down, and we really need to stop that from happening. Make sure it's for the guild, make sure the project name, and in fact the person who is approving it, since there's another CAM that's required, should check for that, and you might be asked to approve someone else's project purchase, since you might be in there at the same time. So I suggest that you always check for this, and that'll make things run well. Now, this wood that is purchased is actually owned by the students. It was part of the price that was given for the class. So students should have the option of taking home any of the scrap wood or cast-offs of the project. But if not, if they give it to you, then that's fine as well. You could use it for a guild project or something else. We have an instructor-led program, so we don't schedule classes unless the instructor initiates the scheduling process. We need to schedule far enough in advance that the students can plan. Sure, you can always tell me to set up a class next month or even next week, but scheduling by quarter is good. We've had some incidents in the past year where people have scheduled, say, 2 weeks out, and nobody had a chance really to sign up, and so we had to cancel the class. So scheduling out further is great. Some folks have scheduled out for the rest of the year already, and that's even better. Though I will still ask every quarter because I know that things change. Let me know what dates work for you, and I'll validate that it works against the guild schedule. Please note that if you use the resource room, we need to know about it ahead of time when I create the reservation so that it doesn't conflict with anything else that might be going on at a later date. Also, be sure that there's a P card who is assisting you with the class when you set up a schedule. We never know when something might come up and someone else will need to step in and take over. We should try and provide detailed step-by-step handouts that students can refer to after class, ideally with pictures. They may not tackle a material that you teach for months, and so it needs to have enough context that they can execute what they were trained on safely. Pictures are important, especially for visual learners, since it really helps provide a little background on what the words might mean, because sometimes they forget what, just a pure text material would even means. If you need help with pictures, let me know. You must align the training in your class with the storyboard for a piece of equipment. We should not be teaching anything that goes against what is said on the storyboard. You should send a note to the students before the class. This will help them understand what they are getting into, as well as remind them that they signed up. In the past year, we've had several students just not attend a class that they'd signed up for because they forgot. And they don't get their money back if it's their fault. Also, when creating a new class, there should always be a dry run and a peer review of the materials to help ensure that we're giving the safest, highest quality materials for our guild. This is an example of a handout, the elements essentially of a handout. It starts with an overview of the class. You can go into detail about the background of what you're going to be producing, as well as the tools involved, etc. So you have a list of all the tools that are being used. Then get into an overview of the first day, as well as a step-by-step guide with pictures that covers each day of the class. At the end of the document, you can also include additional information that the student could use to extend what they've learned if other tools or other design techniques could be used. This is where you could put that. I mentioned earlier the resource sheet. This sheet describes every resource that you'll need to complete the class on essentially a 30-minute time interval. So if you need, say, the chop saw at an hour into your class and a bandsaw at an hour and 30 minutes, this is where you can document that. This is used to plan your class against all the other classes that are going to be at the shop at the same time. You can also describe the areas of the assembly area, or the resource room that you'll need to occupy, and what times during the class. And that's also used in the scheduling process. All instructors should work with their assistants to ensure that any materials or pre-work are sent to the students with enough time for them to complete the work ahead of time. If a substitute student is identified, I will try and get that information to you so that you can send it to them as well. If you're going to hand out materials, have them ready before the class begins. Don't take class times running the copy machine or the printer. Instructors should pre-cut and prepare wood to the point that class can begin. Focus class time on the development of new skills, not on areas that the students should already understand, like planing or basic sawing and that kind of thing. It is okay, though, to have homework between sessions that the students can do on their own. It is the instructor's responsibility to validate that the students have met the prerequisites. Do not let the student who shouldn't be there interfere with other students by monopolizing your time. It's fine to tell them that they haven't. And I know one of the things I do is I ask them to show me materials if I can't validate directly that they've met the prerequisites. They can show me and prove to me that they have essentially the skills to perform the tasks. Finally, there should always be 2 P cards in the shop, as I mentioned earlier, when equipment is running. If necessary, it can be one of the students. Now, in any process like this, there are always questions that come up all the time. Like one of them that I hear is, how do I know who's in my class? Each week in the vacancy report that I send out a link at the bottom that should have a list of all the students in the current quarter that have signed up. And you can look up your class on there. It's essentially an Excel spreadsheet. But there's also a whole list of other FAQ questions that are out there that you can look up on your own at any time. And so, because they're all found online. So please feel free to look at that. And I think that's the end of this recorded session. So thank you very much for listening. Finally, I'd like to ask what's on your mind about what you've just heard in the presentation or about anything else related to advanced training. Feel free to send me an email if you want to document it. Otherwise, just talk to me. Thanks.
Stand with final.
All right, here's what we're going to talk about. Last year, you did a great job. You trained 137 people. We have new videos that the boss people are introduced to that they're required to watch. That's the clamps, random orbit sanders, the tool room, a couple of others. The new classroom sessions that we've instituted that are on day 1 and day 2 of clusters cover the things that we took out of the boss session, which had to do a lot of things with like the guild hours, how to keep in touch, things like that. They are now in the day 1 and day 2 classroom sessions. The tool room tour and the wood room tour are now in the classroom session. So if you had in the past during your cluster lessons taken somebody into the tool room as a tour or taken someone into the wood room as a tour, it's no longer necessary. We take them in the classroom session into the wood room. We show them how to buy wood. We explain the parameters of how to buy wood, and the procedure on how to do it is available to them on the new member website. Don't quit. Keep trying to do it, because I can't remember all of this stuff.
Well, I put the presentation back up so you could see it.
Okay. I've already done that. Okay, so the biggest thing that I really wanted to talk about, and I hope they get it up here, is in December we did a dry run. Those of you that were involved in it, we did a dry run of a new way to do the practicum light. And when we did it in December, it worked great, but that was with 8 students. We took a chance and we did it again this month with 11 students, and it worked great. At least in the morning it did. The afternoon was a little crazy. But here's what we're doing now. Instead of the old practicum light, which was usually that gooseneck board or some other board that required a lot of Forstner bits and a lot of time on the drill press, We're now doing our charcuterie board with handles, but the way that we're doing it is what's different. Instead of moving as a group, the students are given a set of instructions or asked to download and print a set of instructions and then asked to follow them. And what we do is we set each student off on their own with the instructions, and instead of the instructors going with them, the instructors are stationed at the tools. So the student is expected to follow directions, go to each tool, perform each operation that is necessary, and then move on to the next tool at their own pace. As I said, we did that last week, actually, in January, and it worked great. So what's going to change now in the practicum is that we're going to swap them around. The old practicum classic, what we call the practicum classic, the multi-piece breadboard, cheese board, whatever you want to call it, will now come first, and it's going to be retitled group practicum. The students and the instructors move as a group. You go through all of the same operations that you did before, and the old practicum light is now going to be called individual practicum, and it will come last. So everybody gets an opportunity as a group to go through, learn what it takes to build something, learn the operations, learn the sequence, and then the last day of clusters, they'll be given the instructions and expected to follow the instructions and go through and do it on their own. The other change for this year is because we went to 24 students per month, I'm trying to schedule 2 instructors for every class. There are now 3 students in a track. If I can schedule 2 instructors per track, that eases up a situation where if an instructor can't make it or maybe shows up late or whatever the circumstance is, the class goes on. We've got a backup. We've always got a backup. It's a little difficult because I've got, as you know, a fixed stable of instructors to choose from. And so typically, am I still messing yours?
Yeah, you're still messing mine.
Can you just hit accept there and see if that works?
That's what I was wondering if we got switch controllers.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Switch remotes. Switch remotes.
Oh, for crying out loud.
You don't want to do that. There you
No,
go.
I don't want to do that.
And then,
Oh, yeah, we got switch. Where's the other controller?
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, can you get me back up now? Up there? So anyway, going back to the cluster part, I'm trying to do 2 instructors per track, and that eases up a lot of issues. Last month, or I should say this month, we're still in the middle of January session. We've lost 2 students to COVID. We've lost 2 instructors to COVID, so things are crazy. Well, having 2 per track has made it a little bit easier.
you're good.
Okay, thank you. So get me down.
You don't have the full screen here, but you're.
That's okay. As soon as you go to slideshow, I will.
What do you want?
Keep going, keep going. Right, back up. Okay, leave me there. So, again, new changes. New changes, 2 per track. And here's the format that we used when we did the new version of the Practicum Lite, where we released students every 5 minutes. And what we tried to do and what we did in the dry run in December was every, I think, 5 or 10 minutes. This month, I did it every 5 or 10 minutes. Next month, starting next month, this is going to take place. So everything is reversed next month. We're going to be releasing them after the person who's at the miter saw, which is the first step, moves on. Then we'll release the next one. They have their choice of wood. We put wood out there. We don't let them go in the wood room to choose it, but we put it out there next to the miter saw. They can choose any of 3 species. The past couple of months we've done 3 species, whatever they want, and they go on. So that last day now becomes their project, their test, their responsibility to get through it. And we had some students, well, you're all instructors. We look at students, we go, this one's not going to make it. we were actually surprised. We had several people that we thought, maybe not. They made it, and they did a great job. And the looks on their faces when they put the oil on those boards was great. So a couple of talking points that we need to talk about. Because we have so many people in BOSS now, we don't have enough room in the resource room to do it all at one time. So we're doing it in 2 sessions. Well, by doing it in 2 sessions, we actually have extra room now. So any instructor who wants to attend BOSS and hear what the students are told before they get to you and they say, no, we weren't told that, you're welcome to attend BOSS. The only thing that I ask is that you let me know so I get you on the schedule and we don't have 12 instructors and 8 students. Makes it a little bit easier to control. P-card operations. We've seen this, you have all seen this. Let me reiterate. If you are teaching a class and it is too noisy, or there are P-carders too close, or there is some interference, clusters and practicum instructors have top priority during those training days. If it's an issue, ask the P-carder to either pause what they're doing or cease what they're doing until your class is over. Don't be shy. If I see them, I'll come over to you and have a couple of times come over to you and ask, have you asked them if it's okay? Have they asked you if it's okay? If they haven't, then I may ask them to pause what they're doing. Comment.
Quiet room. Somebody's on the router, somebody's on the down dress table, might be something you ask somebody not to use.
Yeah, the quiet room is the worst place. In fact, it's interesting because when we moved to 24 students, Michelle sent me a note and says, you know what, we're going to have a problem in the quiet room because we don't have enough random orbit sanders. And that's what got me thinking about trying to balance resources in students, and then decided, well, why don't we balance the students against the resources that we had, and that started this whole thing in my head that kept me up at night. Anyway, that's how we got to the new Practicum Lite. John?
In our class especially, in the quiet room, it's an all-day event. 4 sessions all day. So basically, the other tools are unavailable because the students can't hear anything when you got planers going on and sanders going on. And
okay, so that's a good point. How many think it's a good idea to put a sign on that door and say, quiet room is closed today? Okay, unanimous. For the record, unanimous.
Could you make it somehow, reiteration helps, that P-carders know in general that this would be a day that it would be closed? Because if they came into sand.
You know, I started putting up signs on the entrance door to the shop. From the office that said, Clusters and Practicum are using the following equipment today. That didn't work. If I
a listener to all the members.
Once you have your routine down, you know it's the second Tuesday of the
yeah,
year.
and so to complicate that, then we have the new Practicum Lite where we got students all over the place. We would have to close the shop that day too. Essentially close the shop. The only thing that would be available would be lathes, scroll saw. Yep. You know, it really becomes a balancing issue between us, and we do have priority, and the rest of the P-cards that expect to come in that day. And I don't know what the answer is.
With Practicum Lite, should they not be aware of other people working around them? Because that is what a typical shop day will be.
Yes.
I mean, within reason.
Yeah, and again, that goes to that balancing act, okay? We're going to try and make it as focused as we can while you're taking the classes, but you know what? Once you graduate, you don't have that focus anymore. You're sharing the shop with everybody else that's in here, so yeah, get used to it. But my concern is that we have X number of hours to teach these people who are coming in, some with no experience, how to use almost every machine in the shop. And you got an hour and 15 minutes in some classes and 2 hours in the other classes, and invariably it's not enough. But I'll give you a perfect example. When we did the Practicum Lite this time, several people came and said, but we learned that 2 weeks ago. Well, yeah, I know, I'm sorry, but this is why we're trying to help you. And that's why I think doing the group practicum first and reversing it will actually help them see what it was or refresh them. We went through a cluster, or I'd like to go through a cluster rewrite, not a reformat as we did earlier this year. I had bright ideas or bright goals to rewrite all of the lessons. That didn't work. We did a reformat, so at least they're consistent. The last page now always has bullet points for a student to take. I want to get back to rewriting it. We've got a couple that really need some help, and the first two that I'm going to target are routers, and the reason for routers is that was the first one that I sat with the two instructors in the resource room, and we nailed it the first couple of hours. And the other one is Sanders, because we've had some issues with Sanders. So those are the two I'm going to try and knock out first. Yes?
Could I ask you to consider changing table saws, because now we have sleds that are unique to the saw stop that need to be taught, and those are basic tools that new people come into the shop will find themselves using.
To rewrite the table saw one first? Yeah, I'll consider that.
Addresses that.
Yeah, I will. Where am I? Shadow process. Oh, you saw in the other room earlier that Matt is now using a form for shop managers to track people who shadow the shop managers. That will also be instituted in clusters. So if you've got somebody that's shadowing you, you'll have a form that you'll have to fill out. Sorry about the paperwork, but it came from the top. And I already told you that the wood room and tool room are now part of that first day one classroom session. So you don't need to do that again. Instructor reminders. I promised 10 minutes, didn't I? Just a reminder to prep your material before your class. Don't come in the day of the class, run out to the shed or run into the wood room and try and get ready for material. Peggy came up to me, a week ago? She says, guess what we did? We cut all of our material for the next 6 months. That's great. I don't know where you put it. I don't want to know where you put it. For 3 instructors, so that's pretty cool. Use class material downstream. You know, I tried to implement this earlier, or last year rather, and I'd still like to do it. There has to be a way, when we cut a piece of material to use for a particular class, that it's very likely that that material can be passed on and used in another class, as opposed to just being cut up or sent up the vacuum chute. I see Mark back there. Yeah. The jointer planer and the table saw class has figured that out. The jointer planer class cuts an 18-inch by 6 piece of wood. They joint it, they plane it, and they wrap it up in a piece of blue tape, put it out in the shed, and the table saw class grabs it because it's a perfect way to start the table saw class. There's got to be other instances, so I'm just challenging you to think about what the material is that you start a class with and what it looks like when you're done. There has to be a way that we can start passing on material and save a little bit of wood. This is a biggie, and I'll show you why in a later slide. Do not assist the students, even when you're teaching, in the setup of the machine. And the example that I use is, on the table saw, and I'm guilty of this, if you're having a student do repetitive cuts, repetitive setups, and you're looking at the clock and you're going, I got to get through this, and in the interest of time, you say, okay, I'll go ahead and get this for you. I'll go ahead and turn off the safety. I'll go ahead and grab the vacuum. Don't do that. Make the student do all of the steps that they should be doing and develop that muscle memory and make them learn that those are all of the steps that they need to do. In the boss class, if you go to it, you'll see George talks about his moment of power. Okay, his moment of power means go through your setup, look at what you're doing, in your mind mentally know what your movements are going to be, and take that time to pause and think about it before you execute. And it's the same way with the table saw. Set it up, think about, did I lock the fence, did I turn the... Don't do it for them.
And could you
put some emphasis on clean as you go in this?
Or, well, yeah. Engage them in cleaning. And from a selfish standpoint, let me say that at the end of the day, after the last class and everybody is gone, and there's no other classes going on, and I'm going, God, it's 5 o'clock and I'm the only one here. I got to clean up. So that's my selfish point of view. But from a global or a guild point of view, yeah, they need to learn to clean up. It has to be part of the lesson. You got to learn to clean up, because when you get in the shop and you go and use a piece of equipment and you don't clean it up, guarantee somebody will come along and say, geez, who just used it? And then they'll go to the video and look.
Well, it always kind of tees me up when I'm assistant manager or manager.
Yeah, and you got to clean up.
And I'm running around the shop pushing a broom. That's not what managers do.
Right. Well, it is for us. I started, I'm sorry?
Are we going to have time? Are they going to have time to get all this done? Because, you know, these are all good things, but
I know.
we're going to get through it.
Do we want to make the classes longer? Because I've tried and it didn't work. One of the things that I've done back maybe 3 months ago is the student evaluations. For those of you that did practicums that you handed out to the students, said please fill this out before you leave. I've done it now electronically, so when they finish clusters, they get an email from me that says, congratulations, you finished all your classes, please fill out this survey, and they are anonymous. Unless they choose to put their name or their email, the surveys are anonymous. The purpose is try and get some feedback from what they just went through while it's still fresh in their mind. Do we need to make changes anywhere? Well, I've done that for both clusters and I've done it for practicum. So at the end of clusters, they get an email with a survey. At the end of practicum, they get an email with a survey. And these are some of the responses over the past couple of months that I've got. Best experience ever. All the instructors are knowledgeable. Very good information. You can read it. I'm not going to do verbatim, but you can read it. They're pretty positive responses, okay, for the most part. Great overall experience. All the classes, instructors were great. He can rate it high because I already know how to use the tools. Okay. Not sure. I don't get that, but anyway, you can see that there's a lot of good responses. Okay. There's a couple of names mentioned here on the next slide. Don't get big heads. Kudos to Lorraine, Sid, and Matt Green. You have apparently made an impact on at least one student. But again, these are anonymous. And so whatever is coming back from the students. And it's nice to see that feedback. I sent out one, I think it was last month, I sent it to all of you, that someone had taken the time and written a beautiful response to the survey, and I cut it out and I sent it to you all. Here's what I was talking about earlier about coming back to or referring to something that we talked about in terms of setting up. These are responses from the practicum experiences, and you will see that they're saying the instructors are doing too much. So this is actually coming from the students. They're saying, well, wait a minute, you just told me that this practicum is my evaluation of how well I've learned what you taught me over the last 2 weeks, and then you went ahead and did it for me. So this is something that I'm just challenging all of you again. Please don't do the setup for them. Obviously, don't let them do something that they're going to get hurt doing, but let them do most of the work, okay? You can see that they're pretty clear. You all did the work. Okay, here's my challenge, and you all know what it is. Last January, when I first did this, you probably all remember me going to revision 9. And I got to tell you, by 7, I was ready to call Tim and say, this is not my job. But I will tell you that we're down to like 2 or 3 now. So it's working. Tim passed on a spreadsheet to me that looks like this. That's a copy of it, that I use to schedule. And the yellow parts, that's sort of my annotation. If somebody shadows something, I put in a note in there that they shadowed, and S1 means 1 shift, so that's 2 classes. So anybody in here that's shadowed 2 sessions is S2. They've done 4 classes. And oftentimes at that point in time, I'll have to go to them and say, okay, what's your end game here? Do you want to just like spend your life shadowing classes, or do you really want to teach? Or are you just doing it to earn hours? Okay, there has to be some break somewhere that says, yes, I really want to teach. That's why I've shadowed this 5 times, and I think I'm ready to test out. In the past, I've waited for somebody to come to me and say, you know, I've done this 4 times. I think I'm ready to teach. Great. That's what happens next month. You shadow the first time, you teach the second time. Somebody told me, and I forget who it was, several months ago, why are you letting them shadow the first class and then regurgitate it in the second class during the qualification? I don't know. Maybe we should do it differently. So I'm thinking about that. But the fact is that my scheduling is all based on this. An X means you're qualified. I don't know who this is, but they're qualified in a lot of stuff. An X means you're qualified. An X with a green is my indication, mostly passed down from Tim and some that I've added, that not only are you qualified to teach that, but you're qualified to evaluate somebody who's learning that cluster class. Also, when I ask you all, you come up to me in the shop and you say, I can't be here on the 3rd week of March, and this is in December. Send me an email, because I'll take that email and cut and paste it right into here. So when I do the schedule, most of the time, sometimes I forget, most of the time I'll come here and say, oh, okay, I know that that person's not here. If you send me an email and you tell me what days and what machines, what clusters you prefer, that will go in that here. So for instance, here's one, routers only. Okay. I won't schedule you for anything else. There's no other X's there anyway, but you know, I'm good any day, available to shadow. Well, that was January. I can do January 3rd in the PM and the 5th in the AM. Anything like that that pertains to the schedule, send me an email, I'll put it in there, and I promise I'll try and remember to look. Sometimes I miss it, even though you've sent me 3 emails or told me 4 times, and I apologize. That's about all I really have. I mean, you guys have done an absolutely amazing job. I feel like if it wasn't for your efforts, I probably would have given this up a long time ago. But I know that there's a bunch of you I can depend on. I have February's schedule started. If you want to take a look and jump in now and choose what you want, that's fine. Just put your name in there, and when I finally get to finish it, among the other things I've been doing this week, I will get that published. Any questions? God, what an easy... Oh. Okay.
We wish to thank you for your patience, your willingness.
I'm telling you, I would have given up a long time ago had it not been the feedback and the help that I was getting. I don't really do much other than this. You know, I do a lot of this stuff, you know, in the shop when people when we're missing people, but the scheduling is the challenge for me. The teaching is your challenge, and you're doing a great job. There was another question somewhere. Okay. All right, well, I guess I'll see you all Tuesday.